Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on black Americans from colonial times to the present, by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, M.D., as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina's State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty, his Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875 he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. Two other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane." In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, you know, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, you know, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. And happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It's Anything Goes Friday, and we'll be taking your calls on any topic. In the second hour of our program today, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, along with Mark Pocan, will be with us. I believe she's going to be with us for the hour and taking calls. I've got to confirm that, but she's going to drop by in any case, 1 hour from right now. So, you know, just wanted to give you an update on that. The 17-year-old boy in Los Angeles County who became the first teen in the United States to die. There was a 16-year-old who just died in Spain, a 16-year-old girl. This was a 17-year-old boy. He went to an urgent care facility. He was so sick. He died on the way to the hospital. Ultimately, they sent him to a public hospital. And he died of a heart attack, which is apparently something that happens with this virus. It attacks the cells of the lungs and of the cardiovascular system, and for most people it kills them via their lungs, the people that it does kill, or really sickens them. For some people it kills them by simply shutting down their heart or their bloodstream, and that's what happened to him. But the reason that this urgent care clinic refused to treat him was because he didn't have health insurance. Honest to God. Here we are, in the richest country in the world, but we're only the richest country in the world because Jeff Bezos and Charles Koch and the Walton family have all the money. I mean, that's what it's come down to. So anyhow, a little light news, then I want to get into what Trump has been up to in the last 24 hours. It's really, really grim. So first, we'll lighten things up. My cat, Ketty, or Louise's cat, I should say. My cat is Fang, but Ketty, the youngest of the family, has been. We discovered these videos for cats on YouTube, which are like birds and mice and squirrels and things eating food that gets thrown on in public places. He has gone from having no interest in the TV to spending 2 days for 6 or 7 hours a day staring at the TV. And this morning when we put on CNN, and there's Jim Sciutto, Poppy Harlow didn't show up. I hope she's well. But anyhow, there's Jim Sciutto, and the cat is like watching the TV intently, like, I know there's a bird in there. I know he's going to come out eventually. And then after in the first commercial break on CNN, they went to an ASPCA ad. Those ads for the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They're basically PSAs. This is what happens when the networks can't sell their advertising. This is happening, it's happening to us, it's happening all across the media, is that advertisers are simply pulling back, saying no, and so, the price of advertising is collapsing. So, and sometimes you just have to slot something in. And these PSA ads for St. Jude's and for ASPCA are just, they're space holders, basically. And but when the ASPC ad came on, it's just all these pictures of these really sad-looking dogs. And Ketty just seems to love watching sad-looking dogs. Well, go figure, he's a cat. Also, Portland news from the coronavirus. This is the light news. We'll get to Trump in a second. The Lucky Devil Lounge, it's a strip club. Portland has famously, and something that Portlanders have been very proud of for many years, or at least many Portlanders, is that Portland has more strip clubs than churches. We're unique in the nation in that regard. And it goes back to the gold rush days and the first 100 years basically of Oregon. When this was a town that was, it was a port town, it was a port city. So you had a lot of sailors going through and you had a lot of, shall we say, red light facilities. So anyhow, the Lucky Devil Lounge was forced to close. So the owner, his name is Sean Bolden, started a new delivery service. See, that's allowed under the statewide shutdown order from Kate Brown, our governor here. It does allow food establishments to order takeout delivery. And this strip club has food. I mean, mostly chicken fingers and steak bites and mini corn dogs and things, but they have food. And so he started a delivery service called Boober Eats. And while the rest of the Portland is handing out, this is from Samantha Swindler in the Oregonian, while the rest of Portland is hoarding toilet paper and pasta, he bought out one local store's stockpile of pasties. Deliveries are $30 plus the cost of the food. And he says sometimes it's a surprise for someone, sometimes it's a birthday, sometimes it's people that are really stoned. The dancers are driven and escorted by a security guard. He's providing masks, disposable gloves, and sanitizing wipes. You may not touch the girls. So that's what's going on. But back to Trump. Last night, some really grim stuff is happening in the Trump world. And it's stuff that we need to be talking about, we need to be acknowledging, and we need to be telling our friends about as well. Last night, Jim Acosta, the CNN White House correspondent, confirmed that when Donald Trump said that we're going to start opening up parts of the country, there's counties in Nebraska where there isn't a single case. Well, let's just let them go back to work, right? This is his rationale. He's trying to put the country back to work piece by piece because he's desperate to stop the unemployment numbers, to stop the collapse of the stock market. I mean, it's just that simple. He doesn't want to be viewed as Herbert Hoover. He's going to be viewed as Herbert Hoover. In fact, he's going to be viewed as Herbert Hoover who let at least 1,000 people and probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people die. He has already let over 1,000 people die in the United States because for 2 months he did not do, or 3 months, depending on which timeline you're looking at, he did not even begin the process of testing Americans and did not begin the process of shutting down our country so that we could get a handle on this virus. But now he's wanting to open parts of it back up. And so you've got, this doctor, Dr. Berg, she's head of Health and Human Services. She's an actual MD, and she was out there last night. I was watching this on TV, and she was saying, well, we have some parts of the country where maybe we can, selectively, let them go back to work, essentially. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? That's crazy talk. Well, this is the price of having a job with Trump as your boss. Is when the boss does crazy talk, you've got to do crazy talk. And then last night, Trump goes on Sean Hannity. And this is where it gets really obscene. He says that, it's a fact that many hospitals don't even have one single ventilator. Well, that's complete BS. Pretty much every ICU bed in the country has a ventilator, and so do most of the operating rooms. Although they're more tailored specifically to anesthesiology, but it's a lie. And then he goes on to say, well, these things are expensive. And this is, like I said, Deborah Birx was backstopping this stuff. In fact, Birx, the lawyer, the woman who's the doctor, woman who was participating in Trump's daily coronavirus rallies. She said last night that less than 1% of America is infected. Therefore, hey, what's the big deal? She said, and I quote, when people start talking about 20% of the population getting infected, it's very scary, but we don't have data that matches that based on experience. Well, the flu hits typically 20% of America. In fact, more than 20% of America, and that's with flu vaccines, and that's with herd immunity. I mean, it's doubling every 2 or 3 days. That means in 3 weeks we're at 20%. And that means in 8 weeks, this according to Mark Sumner's math over at Daily Kos, in 8 weeks we're at 60%. And we have overwhelmed every hospital in America, and we are filling the morgues. And that's the trajectory that Trump has us on. I mean, Sanjay Gupta is talking about 128,000 people dead within a couple of weeks, just doing the math. And then Trump starts really complaining to Sean Hannity, and I'll tell you about that right after the break. This is obscene, to quote Josh Marshall.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's beyond obscene, and it's inhuman, it's sociopathic, it's psychotic, it's wrong. And welcome back. Brad in Loganville, Georgia. Hey, Brad, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Good afternoon. I'm not able to watch as much as I'd like to, but yeah, I'm sure you probably had this question, but if you would refresh me on the answer. How do you, what's your take on how this virus got started? Do you think that, back several months ago, right before Mardi Gras, there was I forgot where I saw it posted, and there is a lot of conspiracy theories going on right now that's wrong, but I saw where the societies are trying to get the population of the world down to where it's more manageable. So when they do a full dictatorship, it'll be easier to control. Young children that their immune system.
Yeah, let me tell you where this is coming from, Brad. There's in Latvia. There's another former Soviet country where a lot of this is going on. And of course, some of it's coming out of Russia. There are these 20-somethings who develop these real-looking news websites that look like real news websites. And then they write this complete screaming, flaming BS that is clickbait to get people to go to those websites because they've got advertising on the websites. There was a story last year about these two guys in their early 20s in Latvia who were making over $200,000 a year, propagating stories. This is where the pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. being the child sex ring story came from, for example. And so they're pushing this stuff out. And a couple of the conspiracy theories they've been pushing, one is that this came from a Chinese bioweapons lab. Another is that it came from a U.S. bioweapons lab. That one's being promoted by the Chinese version of these guys. Another one is it's the worldwide Jewish conspiracy that wants to cull the herd and decrease the population because they're planning for, George Soros is going to take over the planet any day. These are all lies, Brad. China back in December, or maybe it was early January, released the complete sequence of this virus. We know the genome. If you look at the scientific literature, you will see that the genetic material of this virus indicates that this virus has been floating around in mammalian, in mammals, in bats specifically, for at least several thousand years. And it's just that, humans start, as human population grows, we're growing into those parts of nature where we haven't been before, and we're starting to disturb ecosystems that have been basically unknown to us for thousands and thousands of years. The same is true of the coronavirus, of the Ebola virus. The Ebola virus, it has been around for at least 10 to 20,000 years, this virus, relatively unchanged. But it wasn't until just the last couple of years that we started digging, really human populations got so big in particularly the Democratic Republic of Congo that we started going into virgin jungle that we had never been in before. And we encountered, and again, it was bats. We encountered these animals that were carrying this virus. Bats have a unique kind of immune system where they basically don't get sick from things and from a lot of things. And so they can carry coronaviruses. Bats carried SARS. There's a theory that bats carry MERS, although they communicated it to camels, which is how people in the Middle East get it. So that's what's going on. That's the real story, Brad. There's no worldwide conspiracy to cull a herd, or if there is, it's not getting much. Actually, if there is, it's obviously headquartered in the White House. But I'm not buying the theory. Brad, thanks a lot for the call. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So Trump calls into Sean Hannity's show last night, and he starts out by saying, you're more important than the president of China, who I had an appointment to talk with. The president of China, who might have some extra ventilators and masks and protective equipment that we could buy. The president of China, who has shipped literally a ton of plasma from people who've recovered from coronavirus to Italy and Spain to help them prevent people from dying. The president of China, who just shipped pallets of ventilators to Spain and Italy to help prevent people from dying. I put off a call with him. Well, here's what he says. He says, because of you, I made that call at 10. I made the call at 10:30. I made it at 10:30. That just shows you the power you have as the #1 rated show in television. Right. And then he goes on to say, I have a feeling that a lot of these numbers, he's talking about ventilator numbers, that, Andrew Cuomo was on TV this morning, again, begging for ventilators. He said, I have a feeling that a lot of the numbers that are being sent in some areas are just bigger than they need to be. I don't believe you need 30 to 40,000 ventilators. You go to major hospitals sometimes and they'll have 2 ventilators. And all of a sudden they're saying, can we order 30,000 ventilators? So Trump has this feeling, right? He says, you go to hospitals, they don't even have one in the hospital, and all of a sudden everybody's asking for vast numbers. When you talk about ventilators, it's a highly intricate piece of equipment. It's heavily computerized. Good ones are very, very expensive. And they say Governor Cuomo and others, they say they want 30,000 of them. 30,000? Think of this. Now, if the ventilators are $15,000 a piece, Mark Sumner over at Coase writes, if Trump gave everyone what they wanted, it would cost $450 million. That's $500 million. He stole $5 billion from the military to build his wall. So he could give every hospital in the country a ventilator that they're desperately asking for and still have 4.5 times as much money left over for his wall. But Trump says, oh, no, you can't do that. And then he's calling Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington State, a snake again. And then he goes after Gretchen Whitmer. He says, we have a big problem with this young woman governor. You know who I'm talking about, from Michigan. He says to Hannity, and Hannity's like, yeah, she's complaining about you. And he says, we don't like complaints. And this is why you've got all these people walking on eggshells, because Trump, the governors get it. Andrew Cuomo gets it. Donald Trump is willing to kill people in states whose governors piss him off. He's willing to kill the citizens of those states. And it's happening right now in front of our eyes in New York State. We have 1,000 people dead in the United States now. In 2 or 3 days, it's going to be 2,000. 2 or 3 days after that, it's going to be 4,000. 2 or 3 days after that, we're talking next week, it's going to be 8,000. 2 or 3 weeks after that, it's going to be 16,000. 2 or 3 days after that, it's going to be 32,000. 2 or 3 days after that, it'll be 64,000. That's the math that Sanjay Gupta, a physician, did on CNN last night.
Well, 2 or 3 days after 64,000, you had 128,000. 2 or 3 days after that, you've got 256,000. A couple days after that, you've got 512,000. That's 500,000. A couple days after that, you've got 1.2 million. And if Trump doesn't do something, if the federal government doesn't do something to bend this curve, to flatten this curve, we're going to have 1 million dead people here in the United States in a few weeks, a month and a half at the most. And instead, Trump is saying, well, this is a quote again from last night, his conversation with Hannity. So it's a very bad situation. We haven't seen anything like it. But the end result is we've got to get back to work. And I think we can start by opening up certain parts of the country. Meanwhile, the New York Times reports a deal with General Motors and Ventec Life Systems, Ventec makes ventilators, to produce tens of thousands of critical life-saving devices seemed imminent. Then the announcement was pulled back. The decision to cancel the announcement, this decision, by the way, apparently made by Jared Kushner. The decision, this is the New York Times, the decision to cancel the announcement, government officials say, came after the Federal Emergency Management Agency said it needed more time to assess whether the estimated cost for the ventilators that were going to be manufactured by General Motors and Ventec Life Systems was too high. Jared Kushner is trying to negotiate a better deal for the Trump administration. And then you got the CDC. The CDC totally botched this thing with the test kits early on. The reason that we didn't get testing nationwide was because the CDC blew it. The test kit took 4, 5, 6 days. It didn't work in some places. Well, you know, from 2009 to 2017, the CDC had one single director, Dr. Tom Hartmann. Since 2017, Donald Trump has gone through 4 CDC directors. His first one was Brenda Fitzgerald. She was a Georgia obstetrician. Her big thing, she joined Newt Gingrich in a historic reenactment of the Boston Tea Party, throwing crates of tea into the Chattahoochee River, and she is absolutely crazy opposed to abortion. So then she got replaced by a couple of other people, and then finally Dr. Robert Redfield. He's the guy who's running the CDC right now, who screwed everything up. He made his name by making premature claims about what had proved to be an ineffective vaccine against HIV. He's associated with a group that calls AIDS the wrath of God. And he flattered Trump so successfully that he got the CDC director pay raised from $219,000 before he took the job to $375,000 a year now. I think we've got our new heck of a job brownie. It's Dr. Robert Redfield, the current director of the CDC, who couldn't even manage to get a friggin' test kit out to the states that were begging for them, screaming for them, pleading for them. I mean, this is how bad it is. And then, you know, this chloroquine, this drug that Donald Trump has been promoting to the point that, you know, lupus patients can't get it anymore. Turns out the French doctor who said that this works, and one of his acolytes then went on Fox News and talked about it, which is how Trump learned about it. This French doctor who looks just like Trump's doctor from New York. It's bizarre. This French doctor faked his research. He faked the research. It was not randomized, it was not controlled, and it was only 32 people. He faked his research.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
But all that said, it's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back with your calls right after the break. Stick around. Thom Hartmann here, broadcasting live from Shelter at Home in Portland, Oregon.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color, As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. In this week's Science Revolution, yes, you're hearing me right. Big corporations, get in the effing line behind the rest of us human beings here. Both Joel Gamble and Professor Richard Wolff join me for a survival guide in a coronavirus economy. And Richard Hallam, author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. Lock of my belt pad. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday. Leonard in Pasadena, California. Hey, Leonard, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? How you feeling?
Good. What's on your mind?
Okay. This is all about the media. We need a free press, free from corporate influence and all that such, because this is how Nazi Germany controlled the people of Germany with the mass media.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And Leonard, next time you call, don't be on a speakerphone. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I want to talk about democracy. So we, in the United States, we're a representative democracy or a constitutional republic. We vote to elect representatives who vote on taxes. So taxes, we do give a consent. My question is, mob rule. Libertarians will often say this is mob rule, which makes it not right.
Right.
Could you explain the difference between, I read on Google that a mob rule is when citizens do things that are outside the realm of the law, so it's not
That's
legal.
Correct. That's right.
Could you explain how, the representative democracy we have in the United States is not mob rule and autocracy?
Sure. Well, first of all, mob rule doesn't, mobs don't respect rules. So, what we have done is by creating the Constitution and by creating a set of laws, we created a structure within which we operate as a society, with very specific rules. Therefore, it's not a mob. And then we also backed away from even direct democracy. I mean, the Greeks back, 3,000 years ago, you had two forms of democracy that happened in ancient Greece, or in Athens, actually. One was basically everybody shows up and votes. The other was they boiled it down to 6,001 people, and that was I forget the word for it. But it was like jury duty. Your name would be called once every year they would call 6,001 names, and if you didn't show up, you were called an idiota. But that was the group. It was like jury duty. They made the decisions for Greece or Athens, one or the other. So we didn't even do that. We decided that instead we would have a representative democracy. So we have a constitutionally limited. That is, the Constitution limits the Constitution limits the powers essentially of government. Number one. And then number two, from the Constitution limiting the powers of government, then you have elected representatives who add another layer of kind of buffer between the mob, as it were, the general public. So no, we don't have mob rules, not even close to mob rule. Libertarians love to say it's a mob rule because people like Charles Koch, billionaire right-wing libertarians, they don't want the mob, that's you and me, taking any of their money in the form of taxes, and so they tend to say that taxes are mob rule, and that programs that benefit more than half of Americans, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that, that's mob rule. But basically what they're complaining about is it's taking money out of their pockets. It's just real simple. Dennis, thanks a lot for the call. Michael in Denver. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hello, good morning, Tom.
Hey, Michael.
I'm so glad that you have these Anything Goes Fridays.
Thank you. What do you want to get off your chest?
The whole situation here, the supply side situation, and I'd like to say my wife's a visiting nurse, and after 2 weeks of being quarantined and all, because they sent her home from work, they've called her back to work because she doesn't have any symptoms, but we spent a week trying to have her tested. it's just me and her at home. And also, I was taking care of all of the business. And now she's going out, and like today, going back to work, she has a half a dozen people that she's going to see, not knowing whether she could pass something on to them, they could pass something on to her. And these are all people that are compromised. So out here in Colorado and all that, our governor, like the other governors, Inslee and all that, great people trying to do everything. Mario Cuomo, where I'm from, they have their hands tied. But what they're doing, in essence, this administration is tying the hands of the first responders and putting them in harm. So I'm
so
afraid.
Does your wife have personal protective equipment available to her?
Well, what she's going to get from VNA, where she works, she asked me not to mention that, but I'm sorry, I did, is still wholly inadequate because they are, they're waiting. Also, their suppliers are just telling them, hey, the tsunami has hit. Everybody's going to have to wait, and it could be weeks or even months. So what are we doing?
Trump could have been ordering this stuff in January, or he could have been ordering this actually in December. There was a grocery store chain, or there is a grocery store chain, I believe they're down in Texas. And back in December, they were looking at the numbers that were coming out of China, and they said, holy cow, this is going to come here. And they started planning for dealing with a pandemic, literally a grocery store chain in the United States. The spy agencies were screaming at Trump, this thing is coming, look out. And Trump was ignoring them. He just, he doesn't listen to the experts. He listens to Sean Hannity. He listens to Fox News. And while Fox News and Sean Hannity and these fools over at Fox News were minimizing this, and Limbaugh was saying it's just a common cold, folks, and all this kind of stuff. While that was going on, Rupert Murdoch and his family were going into quarantine, basically. I mean, they were in total lockdown. They canceled Rupert's 80th birthday party or whatever, however many years he is.
Tom,
this is criminal, Michael.
Yeah, I did want to say also, I've called before. I was in the Navy for 22 years. Way back when, we dealt with things like this because we were out in the world, and in Asia in particular. So you know what era I'm from, and we had to deal with a smallpox outbreak, a mini-demic. It took the Navy 5 days to clear that out. And it was hundreds of people, not I think there was only one of our personnel and all that in the Philippines that got the smallpox. But we took care of it in 5 days. 5 days. Navy doctors, Navy nurses on a ship, okay? Not a hospital ship, just a regular old cruiser and stuff. So,
well, the big advantage you probably had, Michael, was that probably everybody on that ship who was over 40 was vaccinated for smallpox.
That's right. Right. Lots of vaccinations in the military. Who knows what we got, but it probably did protect us from a lot of that stuff. And the last thing I want to say before you let me go, this is what we get. These death panels is what we get now when the Republicans are running our country, and it's happened before, but this is the big one and all. So the government is the last resort of everything. And I hope
and that's what people are learning. Thank you, Michael. That's what people are learning, is that this libertarian theology that's been promoted by the Kochs and other right-wing billionaires, these libertarian billionaires, that society works best when it's just a crazy free-for-all, is being exposed for the BS that it is. And I wish I could say that word out loud, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, Trump is watching these states compete with each other to buy respirators and ventilators, and compete with the federal government. He actually has the Department of Defense competing in the marketplace for these ventilators. You had one of these governors yesterday was just rip-roaring mad because he was outbid by the federal government for ventilators that he was trying to get for his hospitals. Well, these right-wing libertarian billionaires and members of Congress, like this fool who wants to hold up the legislation and force everybody to fly into D.C., these right-wing guys, these so-called libertarians, they think this is a good thing. I can tell you what they're saying. I've debated enough of them over the years. I know how they think. They're saying, oh, yeah, well, what's happening is you're seeing the market in action. You're seeing, and you're going to see it, and it's going to happen fairly soon. that there's going to be more companies making these products because there are states and counties and the federal government and hospitals that are willing to pay more money for these things. And so now it's profitable to make them, so we're going to make them. Now, there's actually some truth to that. And in the marketplace, if we were talking about bubble gum and new kinds of candy, cool. You know, if you've got a product that people want, you can raise the price until you get a competitor and all those kinds. That's how the market's supposed to work. But not for things that have to do with saving lives. This was the argument they made back in the 70s against seatbelts. Oh, we shouldn't have seatbelts. They should be an option that people can buy on their car. When there's enough demand, the car companies will do it. And in the meantime, thousands of people died in car accidents. The libertarian philosophy completely disintegrates when it comes to serious harm. You know, yes, you can run a marketplace for candy bars that way. You cannot run a marketplace for ventilators and personal protective equipment in the, quote, free market when there is massively more demand than there is supply. Eventually, yes, the free market will catch up, as the Trump acolytes are telling us. You know, another couple months from now, we'll have all we want. Well, another couple months from now, 1 million people will be dead, or could be dead. But that doesn't seem to bother the libertarians. They tend to be, frankly, sociopaths. This is the weird thing that I've noticed about all these libertarians that I've debated over the years, is that they basically have no empathy. They don't see humans as humans. They're really good with numbers, not so good with people. Anyhow, back to your calls right after this. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. Stick around. We'll be right back. Thanks. And welcome back. Let's see here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. What's on my mind, of course, is the coronavirus. Yeah, because I have the Free Speech TV where I watch you, I saw it coming out of China in January. And it's true that he was briefed and he did nothing, and we have people dying. But the thing is, we've got to stop it, and we're not getting any help from the government, so it's up to us. And the best thing that we can do is to stay home. He keeps talking about people going to church. Down here across the South, you know, you've got more churches than you have schools. And people are all excited about Easter baskets and Easter clothes like they did in the 50s. That's the attitude. These people have to stay home. There isn't enough testing here. We had, like, over at Macon County, Tuskegee, you remember the red tails? There wasn't any testing over there until this week. Nothing.
Wow.
We have counties here where there is still no testing. Yeah, we were supposed to get a grant of $269 million to expand infrastructure. Well, now they're upset because we don't have any internet for the kids who can't go back to school until next year. Well, guess what? Trump took that money for the wall. Okay, so we have a problem with education. You're not only just destroying people, you're destroying education. But if people don't stay home, you can forget Memorial Day also. We're going to have people die. And my mom worked for public health in the 60s. Her desk was the VD desk. If they had an outbreak, they sent people out and hunted these people down and dragged them back into the clinic because it created a pyramid. And we have a pyramid here that's even faster.
I told this story last week. I forget who I was talking with. It was one of our guests. When I was in high school, my best friend Bill got gonorrhea. And, he had to go in and get a giant shot. I assume it was penicillin or something like that. But he also had to give the names. Yeah, he also had to give the names of all the women, all the girls. I mean, we were 16, all the girls that he'd had sex with. And they went out and tracked him down. I mean, that's what we need to be doing.
My mom came home from work one day, and she said, "Do you know so-and-so?" I said, "He's in my science class. Stay away from him." So I knew he had it. But half of the kids in my graduation class wound up with it, and a lot of them had to get married because the cheerleaders were pregnant. But you can't stop people's behavior unless you get it through their heads that this is going to kill you. And that's what this is going to happen. And Trump doesn't even understand. He's killing his own voters down here in the Republican ignorant South.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he
really
hasn't hit
is.
him yet, that he's killing his own supporters, his own voters. And you look at what happened in New Orleans. Oh, well, it's no big deal. The Mississippi governor's over there praying.
Right. Well, in New Orleans, Louisiana has a Democratic governor, John Bel Edwards. So Trump is, and of course, New York has a Democratic governor, Michigan, Seattle, Washington State, California. He's sitting around thinking that he is killing off Democrats. Honest to God, I believe this, Norma. I think he's that big a sociopath. He has no idea that this is going to creep all the way across the country.
You're from Mississippi to Virginia, Florida. You're going to have a death toll like you've never seen.
Yeah.
Stay home, people, and you can save Memorial Day.
There you go. I'm absolutely with you. Thank you, Norma. It's always nice to hear from you. Thank you very much for the call. And stay safe there in Montgomery, Alabama. We'll be right back. Stick around. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what a day, huh? What a day. Mark in Long Beach, California. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Well, I see it's kind of a silver lining here. The people who get the disease and get through it are basically immune, and if they are trained in their quarantine period to in the sanitation department area, they could be administering the tests when the kits become available. And
yeah, I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, Mark, that there's going to be a lot of demand for there is a big demand for labor right now. Amazon is hiring people. The grocery stores are hiring people. Pretty soon there are going to be people who are able to prove that they have the immune antibodies, that they had the coronavirus and either had symptoms or not, but that they had it and they're better. It's going to take a serological test, a test that actually measures the antibodies floating around in the serum and the blood. And that is available now, apparently, but it's only minimally available. But that is, I think you're right. And I, like I said, I've been saying this for a couple of weeks. This is going to be the new kind of category. And you know, there's critical infrastructure too. You know, the people who you know, the line people who maintain our electric infrastructure, the pipeline people who maintain our water and septic, the garbage guys who pick up your trash. You know, all of these critical infrastructure jobs, they're going to be people who are on the other side of this. That's sort of the upside of it. You know, the downside is that it's 15 to 20 times more lethal than the flu. I mean, that's the downside. Eric in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Eric, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, how are you doing, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, a lot's on my mind, obviously, with coronavirus. But since it's Anything Goes Friday, I thought we'd look into the future a little bit, and I just wanted to get your perspective on where do you think progressives should be going forward. In my opinion, and you can feel free to disagree. It's looking like Biden's the presumptive nominee. I don't think he will be able to beat Trump in the general. The only hope he has is that I think the economy is just in such a bad shape that maybe that will turn out for his favor. But assuming Trump gets another 4 years, what do you think progressives need to do in 2024? Because the way they coalesced around Biden right before Super Tuesday was unprecedented, and I feel like the establishment would do the same thing in 2024 against AOC or somebody else who were to run, because I don't think Bernie will run again. And I just wanted to get your idea. What do you think?
I'm not sure that that's so much the case. My take on what happened was that Bernie had a couple of weeks there where he was way out in the lead. And at that point in time, if he had embraced the Democratic Party establishment and said, I look forward to working with my colleagues and things like that, if he had embraced the media at that point, he would be the nominee right now. But instead, he continued to attack the party establishment, and he continued to attack the media. He went on Rachel Maddow's show, for example, and attacked both. And this was when he was at the peak. So I think that that did him a lot of harm. And I think that that was the point at which somebody, and I'm assuming it was probably Obama, but some party elder made the phone call to Buttigieg and Klobuchar and said, you guys are going to drop out and we're going to push Joe through. But I don't think that Joe Biden can't beat Trump. I think particularly given how he's bungled the response to this virus and how the economy has gone down in flames, I think Joe Biden can easily beat Trump. I do believe, Eric, that the focus that progressives need to have, and they need to have it sharp and to the point right now, is the time to push back on Ronald Reagan's inaugural address in 1981, in January 20, 1981, when Ronald Reagan got up there and he said, government is not the solution to your problems, government is the problem, or words to that effect. When he said that, he kicked off 40 years of libertarian economics, and we are now living the result of it. And this crisis that we're experiencing shows us that government can actually be the solution to our problems when it's run effectively by people who believe in government. But when you put fools in charge, like Donald Trump and the suck-ups who surround him, when you put these fools in charge and they believe that government doesn't have any legitimate role, and Trump just pulled the plug on the EPA, or actually the EPA administrator, Wheeler is his name. He's a coal lobbyist. And he just issued new rules for the EPA saying that any company out there that has, a couple of 100 tons of toxic waste loaded up in a storage tank, and if you're never next to a river, you can just open the valve right now. No problem. We're not going to enforce any more rules on pollution until this crisis is over. And so I predict that we're going to start hearing stories in a week or two about entire towns that are being wiped out, Flint, Michigan kind of circumstances, where our rivers just get flooded with poison, where we're going to find, communities downwind of the refineries in Texas and Louisiana being poisoned by benzene and other toxic byproducts. You're going to see, all this poison coming out as these guys are figuring, hey, some of these products, you have to pay $1,000 a pound to dispose of them in these high-temperature disposal units. And now the EPA says, hey, you can just dump it in the river. Cool. When you've got fools like that running your government, you're going to have a disaster. And sure enough, we have one. But, there are enough of us who remember when government actually worked. And we can look around the world at other countries where government actually works and say, nah, don't want to do it this way. Don't want to be stupid. We'll follow Norway's lead, rather than Trump's.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the L.A. Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
We've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. For the next hour, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Representative Pramila Jayapal, will be with us. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She represents the 7th District of the state of Washington, which is by and large the Seattle area. She's, as I mentioned, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Her website, Jayapal, JAYAPAL.house.gov, and you can tweet her at Rep. Jayapal. Representative Jayapal, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. It is so great to be with you as always.
Thank you, and thanks so much for coming on and taking calls for an hour from our listeners. First of all, I wanted to apologize to you. When you and I were at Town Hall Seattle, and I told this kind of long, rambling story about when Louise and I first met Bernie, and he rushed in, and give me some chicken, and ran and rushed out again. I forgot the punchline of the entire story, which was that IBM, the call that he was taking when he walked into the restaurant was that IBM, which has a large factory in Vermont, had just announced that they were laying off 300 people. And that was what had just made his head explode. And so it was really a story, it kind of came off as a story about grumpy Bernie, but what I meant was a story about passionate Bernie. But anyway, so I wanted to clean that up.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it really does. And I just, afterwards I was thinking, wait a minute, did I tell that part of the story? Maybe I didn't, and it just came across. So anyway, I was just watching Speaker Pelosi on the floor of the House talking about how, what a crisis time we are. She had her 80th birthday yesterday. She's just indefatigable. She's an extraordinary person and representative. I'm curious your thoughts on this moment in history, on what we're all going through, what the crisis and the challenges that you're facing, and then we'll toss it to our callers for questions for you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, just on Speaker Pelosi for a minute, she really is extraordinary. We have differences, as you know, and I'm always pushing hard, and she recognizes I'm always pushing hard to go, further, bigger, bolder. But she is extraordinary, and we would not have these 3 packages without her leadership. Here's the thing. I'm here in Seattle, and we some of us tried to get on planes yesterday to get to D.C. The planes were canceled, so luckily it will be likely a voice vote, and they won't need our votes. Otherwise, we'll have to try to find a way to get to D.C. to vote on the bill. But there is going to be almost unanimous support for the bill in the House. It was unanimous in the Senate. And the reason is because this will be a desperately needed boost for people across the country who are suffering. Here in Seattle, yesterday we reached 147 deaths. We are at an extraordinary number of unemployment claims across the country that have been filed, millions of unemployment claims, the most unemployment claims ever in the history. And we have this epidemic, this pandemic raging, killing people, putting enormous strain on our hospitals, our frontline health workers, as well as all of, I call them first responders, the people that are keeping our grocery stores going, the people that are keeping our buses and public transit going. There's still a group of workers that have to be out there working, even as we have stay home, stay healthy orders. So this package is doing several excellent things, which are in there because we pushed very hard for them. Democrats did. The initial bill that was introduced by Republicans in the Senate by Mitch McConnell was a non-starter. And we put a lot of good things in there, which I will go through. But it also has things that we don't like, including $500 billion in money for industry assistance that essentially Mnuchin will have the vast majority of control over. We did manage to get some oversight in there, but that is sort of another slush fund for Steve Mnuchin, and that's nothing that any of us want. The rest of the bill, however, $1.5 trillion, we feel like we have done some phenomenal things. We have this will move forward the biggest expansion of unemployment insurance in decades. So we will enhance unemployment with federal benefits of $600 a week so that the average laid-off worker is going to receive 100% of their paycheck in benefits. And it also gets rid of all the waiting periods and extends the number of weeks that federally funded unemployment insurance will actually be available. It also creates a new program for gig workers, temporary workers, to be able to apply, people who didn't typically qualify. And it expands work-sharing programs, which my co-chair, Mark Pocan, who I know is on your show regularly, has been such a champion of, which allows people to stay on payroll, right? Because at the end of the day, we would rather have people stay on payroll than have to file for unemployment and then have to reapply for a job. It also has a big component of direct payments. We, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, had put out a set of principles, 12 things. In our direct payment, we were calling for $2,000 in direct assistance per month, plus $1,000 per child per month for up to 6 months, renewable for another 6 months. This is a one-time payment. It's $1,200 in direct assistance and $500 per child. There is an income cap and a phase out above a certain amount of money, but it will at least provide, it's insufficient, but it will at least provide something immediately. And then we can go through some of these other things, small business grants and aid, and this is for nonprofits and small businesses. This is really, really important, and it is $350 billion in loan forgiveness grants if those small businesses keep their payrolls, their healthcare benefits. They can also use it to pay rent, utilities, all of those things. That is going to be very important, as well as another $10 billion in small business emergency grants. And then there's a whole bunch of money, $150 billion, but not nearly enough as I look at what's happening here in Washington State to our healthcare system. This is $150 billion for our healthcare system. We also have a significant plus up of money for community health centers and frontline providers. And we reimburse, but we actually increase the amount that is in the National Emergency Stockpile, which you and I have spoken so much about what happens when the federal government disinvests in everything, in state government, but also in things like the Strategic National Stockpile. we essentially reversed that here, and hopefully it's not too late. One of the big areas that we did get into the airline buybacks, into the airline assistance in particular, is trying to make the industry assistance worker-centered. So rather than a corporate bailout, we want any money that's going to go to these industries to go to payroll, to go to benefits, to keeping people on those payrolls, and also to prohibiting a lot of the things that we saw in 2008 that corporations did, which was, things like putting the money to stock buybacks or dividends, increasing executive compensation, those kinds of things. There are some very good provisions on the airline package, thanks to Pete DeFazio, who was one of the original co-founders of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and is the chair of the Transportation Committee now. They're not nearly as strong as we want, and they don't necessarily apply to the rest of that big Mnuchin slush fund. So there's a lot of good things in here, but I would say that there are some places where we were not able to get things that we wanted, and I'm particularly concerned about the immigrants that are excluded from any kinds of benefits and a few other things.
Yeah, that's extraordinary, and thank you for that summary. It's a great roundup. And we'll start picking up calls for you, and as soon as we come back from this break. Representative Pramila Jayapal is with us, representing the Seattle area of Washington State in the U.S. House of Representatives. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Jayapal, Jayapal.house.gov is her website.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you can tweet her at Rep Jayapal. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Gene in Gurneyville, California. Gene, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hi, Tom and Representative Jayapal. My question is regarding the digital currency that the new bill creates. Tom has mentioned that we're going to need like $10 trillion rather than, this is a beginning, and you kind of allude to that. This is $2 trillion. So we're going to be right back later on. I work in food service, and I'm pretty scared right now, but I trust you guys. You've been able to get through things that the Republicans are fighting. It's penny ante. I forget who ordered it, the South Carolina governor that used to be with the UN. It's like $250 million.
Nikki Haley?
Nikki Haley. She's tweeted yesterday, there's these four things that added up to $250 million, and this is a $2 trillion bill, so it's 0.000125, something like that. I mean, just penny ante. And this is something that's...
Gene, what's your question for Congresswoman Jayapal?
Okay, it's a digital currency, and like I say, we're going to be back at this. The accountabilities that you mentioned apply to. I hope they apply to the Fed. Somehow the Fed is in control of this, because when they create the money, they just hit about.
Gene, let's let Congresswoman Jayapal respond to your question.
Yeah, thanks, Gene, and you're absolutely right. The accountability is key here, and we learned that in 2008. That is what I was referring to. That I don't think the accountability is strong enough for the Treasury money. So that $500 billion that I mentioned initially started out as a slush fund for Mnuchin to do whatever he wanted with it. We have now put at least an oversight panel in there. We are trying to strengthen the actual language around authority and not just transparency. So we don't just want them to tell us what they did. I mean, that's sort of what the oversight panel in 2008 with the TARP bailout was structured as, because that was immediate money into the markets. It happened kind of, very quickly. And then we were like, okay, now we need to know what happened. This is not that situation. We can condition aid to industries on the things that we want to see. And so I mentioned we got some conditions into the airline package, but the rest of the money that Mnuchin has control over, we need to get a lot more accountability into it. And then I'll just say, I completely agree with you. This sounds like a lot, and it is a lot given what we, have not done in the past and what we need to do. But it's really, I think, a very small piece of the total amount of money that we need to do. And remember, this is the third package. So we've now done 2 major packages. This one is, of course, of a different scale, and we are going to come back with a 4th package. We're already working on those priorities.
Now, Gene suggested that this bill authorizes digital currencies. Was he talking about cryptocurrencies?
I don't think that it does that.
Because I've not heard of that.
I think what it does is, it's going to require the country to come up with money, right? Which we're going to have to, we're essentially going to have to create.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Representative Pramila Jayapal is with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for her in just a moment. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 7th District of the state of Washington in the U.S. House of Representatives. And you can tweet her at Rep. Jayapal, and you can find her website at Jayapal, JAYAPAL.house.gov. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Len in Silva, North Carolina. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. I'm concerned. My wife and I have not filed tax returns for several years because we're below the standard deduction. And what I'm trying to find out is, are we in line to get $1,000 check?
Yes, you are. Thank you for asking that. So the way this works is that if you have a Social Security number, then you will be eligible to get the $1,200 per adult check, $500 if you have dependent children. It will be faster if you are a taxpayer and if you have direct deposit, because the IRS will just be able to cut those checks and immediately get them into your bank accounts. They have to import the information from the Social Security Administration for people who are, for example, on SSI and other things, and so who haven't filed taxes but do have a Social Security number. So it may take a little bit longer. We understand that there is a form that you would just fill out, and we will get the details. As soon as we get the details of that, obviously we'll put that all out. But you absolutely do qualify for the check as long as, and you said you're on SSI, so you would absolutely qualify.
Cool.
There is a
Steve in Seattle.
That are listening. Sorry.
Oh, hi, is this me?
For other people.
Oh, hang on, Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
For other people who are listening, the cap on the income is $75,000 per individual, $150,000 per married couple, and then $112,500 for a single head of household. That is adjusted gross income, and it phases out after those amounts. So you get, you essentially start to phase out, and I think it's for every $100 above the phase out, the rebate is reduced by $5, something like that.
Cool. Steve in Seattle, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Question?
Pretty good. I'm in your district. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was something I would like to see in a 4th relief package from Congress, which would be essentially a small life insurance payout for people who die from this virus, because I'm certain that there's going to be a lot of times where someone dies and they're going to be one of the primary breadwinners in their family, maybe the sole breadwinner, and I just want to make sure some of these families are going to get the help they need.
Yeah, thanks. I think that the devastation is going to be enormous. And not only should we look at life insurance for people who don't have life insurance policies, but also, frankly, healthcare. I mean, one of the things we fought for, and Tom, you know, I am the lead sponsor of Medicare for All. I've been pushing for a single-payer system. We are going to see a whole heck of a lot of hurt around the cost of treatment and all of the delays for other healthcare that are going to happen because the hospital systems and the healthcare systems are overloaded. So we tried to get free treatment into this bill. In fact, it's in our House bill that we dropped, but the Republicans would not have it. And I think that this question of both how we handle folks who have suffered, fatalities out of this, as well as people who are dealing with all the healthcare costs that they're going to have associated with this. So you can imagine somebody who did not end up making it, who died, but then their family gets a huge bill for their time in the hospital. That would just be so unacceptable. So we are trying to work on all of those issues for this next package.
Good. Christine in Denver, Colorado, you're on the air with Representative Pramila Jayapal.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I want to know, as individual people sitting here in our individual states, what we can do to push this Defense Act, if anything. I'm so appalled and I feel so frustrated. And I don't know what we can do other than call our senators. Do you have anything concrete that we might do on a daily basis to kind of move this?
I think it is calling your senators, but it's really calling out Trump. Look, the federal government has put some tools in place for the president to use in a crisis like this. And the fact that he has denied this for way too long, he's now saying it's not an issue, that he doesn't need the Defense Production Act. Sometimes he says he's invoked it. Sometimes he says he hasn't. He is now saying we don't need ventilators. Why do we need so many ventilators? It is absolutely criminal. And he is literally, people are dying because of his both inaction and his falsehood. So he could put the Defense Production Act to use. And for those who are listening who don't know, this is the ability to stimulate the supply, the production, and the distribution of essential materials that are needed. It's usually used in wartime, but this is a disaster of epic proportions. We are, in a way, at war with this virus. And so he could convert our current manufacturing capabilities into ensuring that we have the supply, the domestic supply and production and distribution of all these things, instead of the current situation where we don't have enough of things. We're importing things from all over the world because we no longer manufacture them on U.S. soil. And he is allowing states to fight with each other over the price of these things so that the ventilators, the scarce ventilators, go to the highest bidders. That's just unacceptable, Christine. I think we just have to continue to raise the alarm, raise the roof, not only with your senators and representatives, but also directly aimed at Donald Trump.
Yeah, now we're learning that states aren't just bidding against each other, they're bidding against the federal government. I mean, the libertarians have to be ecstatic. This is obscene.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Representative Pramila Jayapal is with us. We've got a 6-minute break here at the bottom of the hour for news and whatever our stations insert there. We put a book report in. But we got a 6-minute break here at the bottom of the hour, and we will be back with more of your calls for Representative Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Her website is Jayapal, JAYAPAL.house.gov, and you can tweet her at Rep Jayapal.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briah Shih and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives. We did food drives. We did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers. We've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated priced drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. When the economy's falling apart, when epidemic disease is sweeping the country, what do? Well, it turns out they've got an answer. It's just not an answer for all the rest of us. They're getting in their private jets and heading off to their private little bunkers. Seriously, that's what they're up to. So I lay out the whole story, complete with details and names, over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Thanks so much. Thom Hartmann here with you. Sorry about the delay. I screwed up a live read there on the commercial side. Representative Jayapal, the House just voted and passed this CARES Act, I think they're calling it. Thomas Massie, I believe his name is, the right-wing Republican, the Libertarian Republican who forced everybody, 216 people into the House chamber, kind of went down in flames. So I guess that's good news.
Yeah, it was. It's really outrageous that he did that, but he insisted, and so that meant we had to have a quorum call, which meant 50 plus 1 of our members, that was 216 people, had to be there to fight his request for a recorded vote, so that the rest of the chamber would not have to fly in from all over the country. Yeah, this is just obscene, but at least it passed. It was tremendous selfishness, honestly, Tom. It was a lot of selfishness. Yeah. And look, this is, I mentioned at the very beginning, and I was actually just reading again parts of the bill, particularly those related to the what I call the Mnuchin slush fund. And it's criminal that we would be put in this position of holding up aid for, having to choose between getting aid to families who desperately need it and then giving him the slush fund. I don't think these oversight provisions are strong enough at all, and we're going to have to figure out how to fix them. But at least we are going to get $1.5 trillion in aid. But all the things you talk about on your website about, how corporations should be getting in line behind everybody else, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And we do a lot of that in the bill here, but unfortunately not everything we needed to.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, let's pick up phone calls here. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Well, yes, thank you. My question is regarding what Representative Jayapal had talked about, the states competing against one another for ventilators, supplies of all kinds, that the Trump administration has put us in this almost pre-constitutional, not yet a nation, Articles of Confederation situation where the colonies did compete against one another, and that's why we became a nation, which we apparently are not now. But the problem is, when you have the states competing against one another, there are winners and losers, and especially when you have, like in nature, and nature's involved here, I'm concerned and wondering if it's not possible that some of these states, the Deep South Gulf Coast states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, who have not put in these stay-at-home orders, and they are very economically, let's say, not capable, they could be overrun in a matter of weeks, their healthcare systems, and economically flattened into failed states. I mean, literally failed states. What about that? What do we do then?
Well, this is a really important issue, Paul, because I just looked at the latest numbers. I follow this economic modeling on the coronavirus that's being done by statisticians across the country, and what they're seeing is 32% increases in the South. You know, if you look at regions and you take New York out, you take Washington out, and you separate out California because there are three big epicenters, what they're seeing is this tremendous increase in cases in these states where a couple things. You have Republican governors who refuse to expand Medicaid, who don't have any healthcare system that is, don't have enough of a healthcare system that's functioning, who already have very bad mortality and morbidity rates and big healthcare issues because they don't have that care there, and have low income. So, you have this increase in these states where they were listening to the president for the first several weeks, where he kept insisting that there wasn't anything happening. And they're probably still listening to him now when he says he wants to get the country, back to work by Easter because he wants to see the churches filled. I mean, it is absolutely outrageous. And I worry about those states as well. We do have money in here for the states. But remember, if there's a Republican governor and, in some cases, the money is not conditioned in particular ways because most states really need flexibility in these funds. But that means that some governors also have flexibility to not use the funds in the ways that we want. So I'm worried about that, too. We're watching that. I think you're going to see a giant increase in cases and fatalities and an overwhelm of those healthcare systems, the ones that they have in those states.
I think we're all getting a crash course in what Reaganomics does to a nation during a time of crisis. It's terrible stuff.
That's right.
Nancy in Woodland, California, listening to 910 AM out of San Francisco. You're on the air with Representative Pramila Jayapal.
Hi. I have a question about the media. I heard that Trump had threatened to pull FCC licenses for media that run ads that he doesn't like, even though they're factual. And I'm just wondering, if he tries to do that, is there anything Congress can do to prevent him or to reverse it or whatever?
I don't think he has the ability to do that on his own. I know that has come up because he is protesting right now an ad, I think that was done by Priorities USA, that is essentially an ad that has his quotes around coronavirus, and it simultaneously shows a graph of the cases continuing to increase and surge, even as he's saying all these things that are completely untruthful about how there's no problem. And I believe that he is filing a lawsuit against them to try to get that off the air. I'm not convinced that I'm absolutely 100% right on that, but I just saw something cross my desk
His
this morning
campaign
about
sent
that.
a letter to television stations all across the country telling them that the FCC would pull their license if they didn't pull the ad.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
So
It's crazy.
it's unclear to me that he has the power to do that as the president, but obviously, he's going to fight this, right? And he's going to make people fight it. Right. And he's being a bully. This is what he does. He bullies, and he hopes that people will stand down.
Yeah, and last night he was trashing Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan on Sean Hannity's show.
Yeah.
And she just noted on a Detroit radio station this morning that she is being told by suppliers of equipment that they have been told not to sell to Michigan. I mean, that's what's going on right now. It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
Josh in Boulder, Colorado. Josh, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hello, Representative Jayapal. COVID-19 likely originated from a wet market in China that sells live and dead animals. There are over 80 live animal markets and slaughterhouses operating in New York City alone. Maybe if we have social distancing measures for farm animals instead of crammed factory farm operations to maximize profit, we can hope to prevent some of these viruses in the future. Will you sponsor legislation to end all live animal markets and factory farms operating in the United States?
Well, I'm certainly happy to look at that. I've been a big supporter of many things related to that, but I would want to look at that. I think that, the thing is here that we are seeing viruses rage across the world. No attention to borders, no attention to citizenship, no attention to income. This is affecting everybody, and we have to learn from this and figure out how we address it for the long term.
Yeah, I think and we just have 45 seconds before we hit a break here that I can't control. So when I'm doing the show from home, I have hard breaks. But China has cracked down on these so-called wet markets. These are the wild animal markets, and that's where MERS apparently came from. It's where SARS certainly came from. It's where this coronavirus apparently came from. And I get it that that's kind of a different thing from slaughterhouses. I'm not a fan of slaughterhouses or factory farming, but the public health consequences of those seem to be limited to food poisoning. But anyway, in the half a minute that we have left, or a little less than that, now that this bill has been passed by the House, you think Trump's going to sign it and it's going to go into effect real fast?
Yeah, Trump will sign it for sure, and it will go into effect. Maybe when we come back, Tom, we can talk about the tension between using existing systems to get money out immediately and the challenge with all the people that are left out of those existing systems.
Right. Okay. Cool. I'll ask you about that. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
Okay.
Representative Pramila Jayapal is with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And we'll be right back with Representative Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour. Stick around. And welcome back. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Yeah, I was wondering, if you have an extra $1.5 trillion to print up to pay off all the student loan debt. If not, if there's any relief at all going to come for those that's been carrying student debt for years, and even lowering the interest rate to like 1%, like we're doing for some of these corporations, would be kind of nice. Because I've been paying 8%, and I cannot refinance this thing, and I've tried thousands of times to say, no, you won't make enough. And it's like, my wife and I went out and got PhDs and teacher credentials and master's degrees, and my son's in college now, and we're still paying on this. And it's just this thing around our neck, and we have trillions of dollars for corporations in the stock market. We don't have $1.5 trillion for these, we played the game right. And
Jeff, let's let Representative Jayapal answer your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We fought for that in the bill. We called for forgiveness of substantial portions of student loan debt, because what we see over and over again is it's not that we don't have money. We don't suffer from scarcity in the United States. We suffer from greed. And the reality is that we could have taken on, and I have a bill called College for All that would provide free tuition. Ilhan Omar, my colleague, has a bill to cancel all debt, and we believe it would boost the economy and give us resources across the economy. So the bill, just to answer your question, it does provide $14.25 billion for higher education emergency relief. It basically says it includes protections for student borrowers by suspending the need to make payments through September 30th, 2020, and during that time, interest will not accrue. So you don't have to make payments during this time, and you won't get more interest. But what we believe should have happened is we should actually forgive those payments. I mean, I actually think debt cancellation is smart for the economy and absolutely the right thing to do to actually give people hope and opportunity in a deeply inequitable system.
Yeah, when you look at the investment of the GI Bill, for every dollar that we spent sending those young people to college back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, for every dollar that we spent doing that, we got $7 to $10 in additional tax revenue that the government would not have otherwise had throughout their working lifetimes because they had higher incomes. I mean, it's just an investment in our intellectual infrastructure, isn't it? So,
exactly. Exactly.
Do you see that coming?
Well, I think that we are putting our foot in the door for some of these bigger changes, universal health care, universal education access. I mean, we are showing that this is what happens when we don't invest, and we have a country where 60% of Americans don't even have $400 in their bank account, and we have these enormously stagnating wages and huge increase in costs. That's just not tolerable anymore. So I think we're getting our foot in the door, and I do believe we've taken big steps. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren's campaigns have pushed these ideas, but we still have work to do because we gotta change the makeup of Congress and get lobbyists out of the Capitol so that we can actually make government work for people again.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. It's 49 minutes past the hour, coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Fair and only slightly unbalanced. We'll be right back with Representative Pramila Jayapal taking your calls, your questions for the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Representative Jayapal, in the last segment, you had asked me to remind you to speak of the difference between how we get money to people who are basically part of the normal economy versus people who maybe function somewhat outside of the, quote, normal economy. I'm assuming you're talking about like gig workers and people who are undocumented, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously in an emergency, the quickest thing to do is try to use the systems we have and expand them as much as possible, right? Like if we can take unemployment insurance and expand it dramatically, we will cover a lot more people than we do right now. We have to do that. But we are still leaving out a lot of people. I'll just give you an example. If you are an undocumented farm worker and you're putting food on the table that we desperately need in our food banks and on our tables right now, you are getting nothing from this package. You're not eligible for the cash benefit. You're not eligible for any of the unemployment insurance. You are really left out completely. A lot of gig workers, we have tried to create ways that they can get benefits, and we'll see how well we did with that. But we need to make sure that, as we do this, we don't assume we're taking care of everybody because we're really leaving out a lot of people just using the systems we have with the restrictions we have. Tried to take away some of those restrictions, but on political issues or issues that have become political, I should say, like immigration, unfortunately, we're just continuing despite the fact that if we don't allow everybody to get tested, regardless of citizenship, that's hurting the public health of everyone.
Yeah, amen. Brad in Elk Grove, Illinois. Brad, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
In the federal government yes, are you there?
Oh,
this
go
is
ahead.
yes. Has anyone in the federal government considered what's going to happen if the coronavirus ravages our first responders and critical infrastructure? And then second question is, going forward, what will that look like when we may have to quarantine for a much, much, much longer period than anything we have right now?
Yeah, that is exactly why we have to take strong, bold action early. And I worked in public health for 10 years, every public health person will tell you that you have to take that action before it seems necessary. If it looks like you're overreacting, and I think I heard Dr. Fauci say this, then you are taking the action at the right time, because we can't wait until it has already spread. We have to actually go to containment. And we need to make sure that these first responders have the personal protective equipment, which they have not had. We need to make sure that we are adding beds. We will be adding a new DOD is providing us with a field hospital here in Seattle because we just don't have capacity. Our ICU beds are full. So we'll move people out of the hospitals that don't need those ICU beds so we can move more people into the ICU beds. But this is a huge issue you're raising, and particularly our first responders who are being asked to work without the protections that they need. The Republicans stripped out of this bill something I care deeply about, which was the OSHA emergency standards. These are workplace standards that we need to protect our frontline workers, because if we don't have medical personnel that are able to staff this, we are going to be in even more of a world of hurt. And we are already starting to run out of those folks. We're asking people to come forward and help us with this, but this is a real issue. That's why we're trying to get more personal protective equipment, more money for the hospitals, so that we can stand up our healthcare system through this crisis. And this is not going to be enough, what we have in this bill. We're going to have to go back and do more.
Mickey in Magnolia, Texas. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hi, Tom. First of all, my husband and I watch you every day, and we appreciate you. My question is, my daughter told me she read that the money being distributed to the individual, I think starting at $1,200, depending on your income, that amount will be deducted from your tax refunds in 2020. And I want to know if that's true.
I do not believe that is true, but I will have to check on that. We can send an answer to Tom so he can get it out if you listen to his show. Sure. But I don't believe that's true.
That would mean that the money is basically a loan, not a grant.
Exactly.
And
that's why I don't think it's true, but I just don't have the answer in front of me right this moment.
Okay. Jane in Seattle, you're on the air with probably your representative.
Hi, Congresswoman Jayapal. I'm curious, Trump's announcement that he's no longer enforcing any of the environmental protection laws from the EPA, is that not an impeachable offense?
Oh, Jane, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and you know that we voted in the House to impeach the president, not on this, but on a couple of other charges. I believe there are probably more that he can and should be impeached on, but that in and of itself may not constitute an impeachable offense. It depends on what exactly he's doing. So there are lots of ways in which he is circumventing the Constitution and, most importantly, circumventing the balance of powers. And so those are the things that, that he would potentially be impeached on. But impeachment is a political process in the sense that the Senate has to vote on it. And the Senate refused to convict and remove even on things that seemed so incredibly clear around election interference and Donald Trump requesting the assistance of foreign governments to interfere in our elections. So unfortunately, I don't know that impeachment is the way that this president is going to leave. I think it's going to be through ensuring fair and free elections and voting him out.
And that's my biggest concern, is that you're going to have a bunch of Republican-controlled states that are going to say, we can't submit a firm electoral college ballot, and that will throw the vote to the House under the 12th Amendment. And each state gets one vote, and there's a majority of Republican states, so Trump gets reelected. I'm very concerned about that. Representative Jayapal, I'm sorry, but there's not enough time for you to respond to that. We're out of time, but thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for everything you always do.
You're listening.
Thank you. It's great talking with you.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives, we did food drives, we did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget.
The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers. Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. Jared Kushner involved himself in the negotiations between this ventilator company, Ventec, and General Motors to retool one of their factories in the Midwest to make these ventilators, and apparently blew up the negotiations. It was supposed to be announced day before yesterday, was never announced, and then last night on Hannity, Trump was saying, we don't need that many ventilators, these hospitals. Most hospitals only have 1, or 2. Some have none, which is all lies, of course. So a little bit ago, Donald Trump, I don't know if he watched Andrew Cuomo's thing on TV or what, but a short while ago, Trump tweeted and ordered GM to start, and Ford to start making ventilators, and ordered GM to make them at a factory that they have closed and sold to another company. So it's like, really? This guy so doesn't know what he's doing. He really thinks he can run a country like he ran his business, like he's a king. And he just makes decisions and, hey, if things don't work out, just get another $100 million from daddy. And then when you burn through daddy's money, well, you just declare bankruptcy. And when that bankruptcy isn't enough, you declare bankruptcy again. And when that's not enough, you declare bankruptcy a 3rd time, and then a 4th time, and then a 5th time, and then a 6th time. That's what Trump does. He kills everything he touches. And his grifter family, oh my God. And here we are. Here we are. We're all stuck with this guy. And it's not just him. It's the grifters who follow him around, the rest of the Republicans. This is Governor Tate Reeves is the governor of Mississippi. And he after a number of his states, Tupelo, for example, Mayor Jason Shelton, had put into place basically a shelter in place, or don't go out if you're not an essential employee. And he said it's definitely putting protections in place for the state's economy. Actually, it's the other way around. He says there's no question that he's speaking of what the governor did. So let me get to that in just a second. So he was protecting his city So then the governor comes out and says, no, you can't do that. Cities in Mississippi, you can't shut down. I'm unshutting you. And Moss Point Mayor Mario King had closed restaurants for dining in, salons, barbershops, houses of worship, and more. This from Laura Clausen over at Daily Kos. Reese's order was completely makes our order null and void, said Mayor King. So barbershops, so this is Mississippi today. So barbershops and salons are open today. People are actually at church making up Bible studies lost on Wednesdays. So they're having Thursday Bible studies. I guess this was yesterday, actually. There are restaurants that reopened their dine-in services today. Mayor King told the Mississippi Free Press. I understand they're just trying to make a dollar, but if one person sneezes who has COVID-19 and someone else comes in, they possibly exposed to that. So his order puts our people at risk. And he described Governor Reed's action as complete foolishness and foolery, and that he's embarrassed not just as a mayor, but as a citizen of Mississippi. We are, said Mayor King of Moss Point, he said, we are the laughingstock of the country because our governor has enacted an order that not only does not protect the safety and welfare of the people, but puts Mississippians in harm's way. Mississippi had this morning 485 cases of COVID-19. 108 of them were brand new yesterday. They're just starting to ride the roller coaster up. And nobody has seen it flatten, and nobody has seen it go down in the United States, and we have more cases in this country than any other country in the world because Trump refused for 2 months to do anything about a disaster that he saw coming. Now, this is an old Republican trick, right? When George W. Bush was made president by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2000. In January of 2000, when the transition happened, President Clinton told Bush personally, Sandy Berger told us all this on this program. Sandy Berger was national security advisor to Clinton. Clinton told Bush, Osama bin Laden is coming to attack America. Vice President Al Gore told Dick Cheney, Osama bin Laden is coming to attack America. Sandy Berger told Bush's national security advisor Condoleezza Rice, bin Laden is coming to attack the United States. And Trump said, oh, this is Clinton stuff. These guys are obsessed with bin Laden. Don't do anything. He put Cheney in charge of it, and Cheney's task force on this issue literally did not meet until the end of August. Two or 3 weeks before 9/11. Literally did not meet. Completely dropped the ball. No interagency coordination, nothing. This is what Republicans do. What was Dick Cheney doing during those 9 months, or the time that they were sworn in until 9/11 happened? He had convened the Energy Task Force. He was literally carving up Iraq and deciding which oil fields in Iraq were going to be sold to which companies. Not making this stuff up. And Trump, same thing. Which one of his crony corporations are going to get his bailouts? Who's going to get the money from the federal government? How can they figure out a way to make money off this? It's obscene. Anyhow, as I said, anything goes Friday, so let me pick up your calls. Jenny in Clio, Michigan. Hey, Jenny, what's on your mind?
I'm just wondering, there's an article in ProPublica about people with intellectual disabilities may be denied life-saving care under these plans as coronavirus spreads. And it just mainly says not just a couple of states. There's vague provisions in other states. But it comes down to, will our civil rights really going to be still apply in a pandemic? Because, since I know several challenged people, and I'm sure a lot of people they filed already grievances with federal government to clarify all this. They can.
Yeah.
I'm
Jen,
just wondering
I don't know the answer to
that.
That is a very kind of specialized area of law that I'm not that familiar with, and with regard to this bailout, I don't know either, but hopefully they will. Hopefully.
And,
Carol in Port Charlotte, Florida. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind?
Yes, I am a live-in caregiver in Florida in the long-term care, and I just want to make a point that a lot of the caregivers are older people. I am 65 years old, and so that's all I wanted to say. A lot of us are older who are in the long-term care in the
So we have people in their 60s caring for people in their 80s as a virus comes along that wipes out people who are over 60.
And even people, even I know people who are even 80 taking care of people.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
No, I do believe it. In fact, I've seen that in my own family. And we know that Florida is just going to see an explosion of this, in the next few weeks. That the virus was just running rampant through spring break, and Ron DeSantis, the governor down there, he still has not put a shelter-in-place order in for the state, has he? To the best of my knowledge, he has not.
I haven't looked this morning, but I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Oh. So that is all I wanted to make a point about.
Yeah. Okay. Carol, take good care of yourself. Thank you very much for the call. This is so troubling that it's like something out of a science fiction movie is here, and it's real. And we've got a buffoon, a fool, an idiot running the country and running the response. And we've got his grifter son-in-law trying to negotiate with these companies. I mean, it's enough to make your head explode. Metaphorically speaking, of course. The coronavirus will probably make your head explode. Oh, man. Oh, and then on top of that, by the way, the news media is not able to bring us the actual stories of people who are sick because of medical confidentiality laws. So we're hearing about these crises from the point of view of the doctors and nurses, but the patients, we're not seeing how sick these people really are. This is a really brutal disease. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour, and Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. David in Spotswood, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I'd like to just make a quick point and then ask a question. They're unrelated to each other.
Okay.
I just want to point out, you were talking about Donald Trump filing 5 bankruptcies. I wanted to point out that he was the first too big to fail bank. He was so big, in fact, that they had to make him appear wealthy so his hotels would still keep running.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So the banks learned from Trump, and then we had the crisis in 2008, and we have the crisis now. And the question I wanted to ask you is, after this is all done and over, since the Republicans want to make it done and over at their choosing, but when it's truly over, will the United States keep the global supply chains, or will everything be insourced? And will everything be insourced at other countries? And will that also help the climate change problem?
I have an article that was published this morning over at the LA Progressive website, specifically about this, talking about the importance of bringing our manufacturing back home, not just for the profitability of America to rebuild the American middle class, but also as a national security issue. This has been something the Democrats have been harping on for years and years and years. I realize that there was a faction within the Democratic Party, the Bill Clinton faction, that bonded with the Republicans. Bill Clinton, of course, promoted the NAFTA bill that Reagan and Bush Sr. had negotiated and worked out all the details on. But the Clinton faction was never the majority of the Democratic Party. The majority of the Democrats were opposed to so-called free trade. And Trump simply took that Democratic position and ran on it in the election. And that was, that was a problem. But I'm with you. Thank you. Robbie in Portland. Hey, Robbie, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out some hypocrisies that I see with the Democrats, and particularly you too. It's like, if we're concerned about, election rigging, why are you going to vote for Joe Biden if we are?
Yeah, Robbie, I'm not going to go there. I'm just really, tired of all this Biden trashing, and frankly, of trashing me. I'm a big boy, but I don't think it adds anything to the show. Anthony in Detroit, Michigan. Hey, Anthony, what's on your mind?
Hey, TGIF.
There you go.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you were talking about how Jared Kushner messed up the two negotiations, and then you just said Trump tweeted, "I'm ordering Ford or whomever." It's like, because I watched the press conference yesterday, and he was like, "Oh, you don't gotta force them to do it. They just, So I don't know. That's pretty funny, but I don't know. But my question actually was about the unemployment insurance. I was wondering how that would shake out. So I actually called.
You just go through your.
Yeah.
Yeah, you file unemployment the normal way you would do it. In most states, you can do it on a website, and in some states, you have to show up in the offices. Although I'm guessing that they're probably diminishing that requirement. And once you qualify for state unemployment, the federal government will give the state an additional $600 a whatever it is. I thought it was $600 a month. I think Representative Jayapal said $600 a week. I've got to check that out. But anyhow, that extra $600 goes from the feds to your state, and then it just appears in your unemployment check or your direct deposit to your checking account. So that takes care of that, Anthony. Anthony, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. It is coming up on 20 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for we the people of the United States of America. Stick around. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these 3 guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom? What I was talking, what this looks like is like on the reserve. If you have too many animals, like this one I particularly saw was elephants, and what they did was what they call culling the herd. You know, that's like taking out so many animals so that they can remain on the reserve. And I see this somewhat like that, because he knew if all what's been said is true, he knew sometime in January, but he didn't say it until just a few weeks or so ago. And so he was allowing this virus to come into America and start killing people, culling the herd. Culling
the herd, yeah.
And
it's a phrase that's, when I grew up in Michigan and when we lived in New Hampshire and Vermont, they're all big deer hunting states. And every year the Department of Natural Resources would determine how many deer needed to be culled from the herd in order to keep the herd of deer healthy for hunters, and they would issue that number of hunting permits. Maine, we talked about this in the first hour. I think that it's possible that Donald Trump actually thinks that he's just killing people in blue states, because so far, most of our major cities are in blue states. And so far, it's been major cities, where you've got a lot of air traffic as a consequence of there being big cities, where it's been hitting. But this is going to wipe out the red states. They are so resource poor. Yeah. This is going to be an apocalypse. It's going to be a holocaust for these red states. It's just going to come, a few months after the blue states. And he's sitting around gloating about how he can trash Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, and he can say that Mario Cuomo or Andrew Cuomo, has to treat him nicely and all this kind of crap. but it's gonna bite him in the butt, Maine. It really is. Maine, thanks for the call. That was a good one. Deborah in Denver. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for my call. I just want to tell you real quick here. You know, the coronavirus is going to peak during Passover. If everybody watches the Ten Commandments, it's very we're going through, and but we're under economic slavery, baking bricks without straw. So anyway, what I wanted to say is that I want to reach out to Mike Pence and call him out on his Christianity, because this is a salvation issue. And I wouldn't give up my salvation for anything. But if innocent people die and you have the ability to invoke the 25th Amendment and you're not doing it, that's very dangerous to lose your salvation over something in somebody like Donald Trump. He has the power to do something about this. And I would encourage him to do so, because nobody will look bad on him about this. This is something that only he can do. And I would encourage him as a Christian, as a believer. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and I really hope that he invokes the 25th Amendment and removes Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is so dangerous. He's allowing millions of people, or it could potentially be a million people or so, die. And for what?
Yeah. In the United States, yeah, and just to assuage his ego, apparently. Deborah, I think your point is well made. It's kind of gallows humor time, I guess. A couple of days ago, I made the joke to Louise about maybe we should just put some red paint over our front door. Which in the Passover story is how the Israelites, notified God that don't kill our oldest son. We're not in with the Pharaoh. But this is biblical. This is I don't know if it's literally biblical. I tweeted this morning that if there is a hell, Donald Trump is going to burn in it for all of eternity, and this is just terrible. Deborah, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Donna in Chicago. Hey, Donna, what's on your mind?
Yes. Well, I read that the bill that just passed the House has a provision that proposes cuts to or eliminating the Social Security payroll tax at least through the end of the year.
Yes, it doesn't eliminate it; it postpones it for corporations for their part of it. And there are some people who are concerned that that's a way of strangling Social Security or cutting its funding. There are others who are saying no, it's not. I think Pramila Jayapal's point is well taken, that there will be future bills, and the future bills will have recalibrations of previous legislation in them. If this is a hit on Social Security, as some people are suggesting it is, then we will be able to fix that in future legislation. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't, Donna. I mean, that's
okay, because that's concerning to know that the Republicans in Wall Street streeters feel, are so against Social Security and feel people, are getting too much money on Social Security.
They've been trying to take down Social Security ever since 1935 when it was passed. They called it communism and socialism back then. They still do. And mostly what they want to do is shift it over to the banks on Wall Street so that those banksters can get their hands on that $2.7 trillion, Social Security trust fund and basically loot it. But I don't think that the Democrats are going to let them do that. Donna, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. What an extraordinary time we're living through. This is the time. These are the kind of times that history talks about. And so let's try to make it through safely and keep each other.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And hold each other in our hearts and in our love. I mean, this is what we have to do. We'll be back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Fred Kaplan's new book, The Bomb: Presidents, Generals, and the Secret History of Nuclear War. This is from the introduction. For 30 years after the Cold War ended, almost no one thought, much less worried, about nuclear war. Now, almost everyone is fearful. But the fear takes the form of a vaguely paralyzed anxiety. Because of the long reprieve from the bomb's shadow, few people know how to grasp its dimensions. They've forgotten, if they ever knew. The holiday from history began on August 8, 2017, when President Donald Trump, barely 6 months in office, told reporters at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, that if the North Koreans kept threatening the United States with harsh rhetoric and missile tests, quote, they will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen, end quote. Even those who didn't remember President Harry Truman's similar description 72 years earlier of the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Truman said, a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. It was clear that in language more bellicose than any president since the end of World War II, Trump was talking about launching nuclear weapons at North Korea. Not if its leader, Kim Jong-un, first attacked the United States, but merely if he developed the ability to do so. Then, 6 months later, Trump signed and released his administration's Nuclear Posture Review, a 74-page document that called for building new types of nuclear weapons and integrating them with the military's conventional war plans. In short, for treating nuclear weapons as normal. The red lights flashed. The alarm bells rang furiously. Yet here is what few recognized. None of these notions were new. The president himself seemed a departure from the norm. His character, erratic, eruptive, thin-skinned, willfully uninformed, a combustive mix for a world leader with his finger on the button. But the button and everything around it were the same. In those decades when most of us chose to forget the bomb, as global tensions calmed and fallout shelters crumbled and we turned our gaze to other problems and pleasures, the nuclear war machine continued to rumble forth in the beyond top secret chambers of the Pentagon, the Strategic Command Headquarters in Omaha, the weapons labs in various parts of the country, and the think tanks whose denizens never stopped thinking about the unthinkable. They all kept at their singular task, wrestling with the dilemmas posed by the bomb's existence. How to deter nuclear war? How to fight a nuclear war if it cannot be deterred? How to win it, if such a thing is even possible. This is the nature of the nuclear era, and the era never drifted into suspension, even if our attention did. Trump snapped us out of our slumber, reminded those of us who were old enough to know, and informed those who weren't, that the bomb is still here. In public over the years, officers and officials have described America's nuclear policy as a second strike deterrence. If an enemy strikes us with nuclear weapons, we will retaliate in kind. This retaliatory power is what deters the enemy from attacking us. In reality, though, American policy has always been to strike first preemptively, or in response to a conventional invasion of Allied territory, or to a biological or large-scale cyber attack. In any case, not just as an answer to nuclear attack. All of these options envision firing nuclear weapons at military targets for military ends. They envision the bomb as a weapon of war writ large. This vision has been enshrined in the American military's doctrines, drills, and exercises from the onset of the nuclear era through all its phases. Most presidents have been skeptical of this vision, morally, strategically, practically, but none of them have rejected it. Some have threatened to launch nuclear weapons first as a way of settling a crisis. The few who considered adopting a no first use policy, in the end, decided against it. There are rationales for these doctrines, drills, and exercises, and for the retention of the first use option. They are driven by policies, personalities, and bureaucratic rivalries, but also by a logic which, once its premises are accepted, hurls its adherents and the rest of us into a rabbit hole of increasingly bizarre scenarios that seem increasingly, if strangely, rational the deeper they're probed. Understanding the nuclear era, the era of our lifetime, means understanding the rabbit hole, who dug it, and how we got stuck inside. It means tracing the maze of its tunnels, which is to say the arc of its history. A story enmeshed in secrecy, some of it still secret, much of it now illuminated by declassified documents and interviews with key actors, though never fully told. How did we get to this second coming of nuclear panic? How did we wind up with thousands of nuclear weapons, far more than any war aims could justify? What propelled the nuclear arms race during the decades-long Cold War? And what happened to the weapons and their guardians after the Cold War ended? And how and why did any of this persist? This is the Thom Hartmann Book Club, the book Fred Kaplan's The Bomb. We've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. He called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land. That he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or 2 later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. So Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Katie in Hudson, Massachusetts. Hey, Katie, what's your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to sort of comment about a possible silver lining on all this. The fact that the entire world has sort of stopped what they normally do. You hear these anecdotal comments about how the environment has improved because there's not people driving cars and flying and doing everything they're doing. And I just hope that the climate people that are monitoring these things are really taking notes, because the climate, anybody that wants to deny it or, fight against any kind of efforts to improve climate change or, stop climate change, their biggest argument is that it'll take forever. It'll take 10 years before this will happen, or it's not worth it because India is still doing this and China's still doing that and all that stuff. And it would be nice if the evidence proves that after 2 months, 3 months, we've, been able to markedly improve the environment just by changing some of our behavior. And maybe going forward, when we all come back online and the world comes back online, perhaps we can do it in a more thoughtful and creative way and realize that we don't need everything that we normally do to, produce fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff and utilize them.
Yeah, I'm with you, Katie, and I think that's one of the possible, and thank you for the call, I think that's one of the possible sides to this thing is that we're going to figure out new living that are lighter on the earth, like working from home, for example. This is an extraordinary time, as I keep saying, and I think that there is a huge learning opportunity here. Also, I said this on Monday, I think it was, if the planet wanted to design a way to keep humans from hurting the planet anymore, this was it. Now, I'm not saying that that's actually what happened, but wow. I mean, it's got us all sheltering in place all around the world. It's grinding industrial activity to zero. It's just, I don't know a better wake up out there. Kent in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Hey, Kent, what's on your mind today?
Oh, I just had kind of been thinking about between the progressives and the established Democrats. You have Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, but then you have Andrew Cuomo and President Trump. What's your take on, do you think there's any possibility of the Democratic Party uniting around draft Andrew Cuomo?
There's actually a conversation about that going on right now. There is a draft Andrew Cuomo movement. I don't know how deeply it's embedded in the Democratic Party, but it's certainly going on. And, we'll see where it goes, Kent. I think a lot is going to depend on how Joe Biden comports himself over the next few weeks or months, and we'll see where this all goes. Kent, thanks for the call. James in Spokane. Hey, James, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Hope you're doing well, sir. Just want to reiterate that the stock market this time does not reflect our economy at all. And, I listened to Max Kaiser on your old RT network, and, I shouldn't describe it that way. But anyway, he says that the stock market could lose 50% of its value and it would still be quite profitable. I think he's right in that.
Yeah.
Tom, when we went off the gold standard, was it anything more than Tricky Dick being Tricky Dick? I mean, was it just a Ponzi scheme that we're in at the end of now?
I don't think so. Being on the gold standard is a very, very difficult thing for a country whose economy is rapidly growing. You could argue that FDR took us off the gold standard by, Nixon did formally in 71 or 72, but I think it really happened back in the 30s. And it was as the country was putting its economy back together, and the economy starts growing, if you're on the gold standard, as the economy grows, the money supply has to grow. And for the money supply to grow, you have to have an equal amount of gold in Fort Knox. And that just reached the point where it was absolutely untenable. And we were not restocking Fort Knox, to the best of my knowledge, in the 50s during Eisenhower or in the 60s with Kennedy and LBJ and whatnot. So I think we've been functionally off the gold standard for a long time. Yeah, we basically became the petrodollar.
Yeah, and perhaps that was ill-advised.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. I mean, right now the oil is kind of upending everything, and that's going to be real interesting to see how that shakes out. Thanks a lot for the call. Lori in Naperville, Illinois. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, I just want to make everyone aware, make a point that this is the third weekend of spring breakers coming back. And in my state in Illinois will be the week that we were told to lock down last week. And they're coming back this weekend. And I hope that the governors will tell these people to self-quarantine. And either they'll be, I think they should be fined or arrested if they don't self-quarantine. I work in a grocery store in Naperville from 4 to 9 every day. And everybody in my town has been following the rules about not leaving and only going, for emergencies. And we've been playing by the rules. So I don't want this potential carrier coming into my store. Well, we have set standards. We only let 30 customers come in at a time. We let the aging go first hour. We have tape on the floor where customers have to stand 6 feet apart. We only have 5 registers open to allow open space between our workers and customers. And Governor Pritzker will be on today at 2:30, and I hope he addresses this because it's all going to, happen this weekend from everybody coming from Florida and Mississippi. It's only a 16-hour drive.
Spring break was all over, Lori. What did I miss?
Nope. Teachers.
Right. I thought spring break was all over.
Last weekend. No, this last week was spring breakers. Teachers in certain school districts here in
so
outside
different states
of Chicago.
Stagger them.
Correct, they do.
Amazing.
There's about 3 weeks. First week of March, second, third.
Okay, I didn't.
Yeah, they need to self-quarantine for sure. So,
Lori, I'm with you, and hopefully that message gets out. A lot of people in Illinois are listening to this show, so hopefully your message got out there. Good on you, Lori. I'm sorry. This is Lori in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi there. I wanted to bring up an idea about feeding.
Hey.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I wanted to bring up an idea about feeding the truckers, but I also wanted to say that I called in last week about Airbnb, and we have got notice that pressures from hosts, they have opened them up to first responders. And those of us who can do it for free are offering our homes for free, and those that can't, they're letting go of all the fees so that they can make it affordable. So that's a good thing. And the other idea I had for feeding truckers is all of these food carts that are sitting in areas where there used to be foot traffic. I wonder how possible it would be, because I know they're mobile, to get them to truck stops, because I know the truckers are having a hard time getting food on their route. So
Oh, that's a
I don't
great
even
idea.
know if that's possible.
That's a great idea.
but-
That might. Yeah, it would depend on the state. It would depend on how rigid the clampdowns were. But yeah, the truckers are having. We're hearing that from truckers who listen to this show on Sirius XM mostly, and yeah, that's excellent. Lori, thank you. You're a font of brilliant ideas. Inez in Villa Rica, Georgia. Hey, Inez, what's up?
Hi. I was just wondering, are seniors, especially ones, seniors that are on retirement, will they be getting part of the stimulus?
Mm-hmm. Yes. If you're on Social Security, you will get, assuming that your income's under $150,000 a year, you will, or you're, individually $75,000, you will get $1,200 in your check. There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks a lot, Inez. Jeff in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Great to hear from Congresswoman Jayapal today. Tom, last week, Will Bunch, a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, he tweeted a link to the WAPO piece about how Trump was warned back in January about the coming pandemic. And Mr. Bunch captioned the tweet, quote, "Coronavirus determined to strike inside the U.S., unquote, a biting reference, direct reference to Bush being warned about Osama bin Laden prior to 9/11. So besides beating that truth like a drum, as you've been doing so well, Tom, what do you think of the idea of Bernie's campaign, and Joe Biden's for that matter, forming a shadow coronavirus political task force that holds a national press conference every day to give a report of what's really going on around the country, keeping people informed and debunking Trump's lies and propaganda?"
I think this is something that Tom Perez and the Democratic Party should be kicking around, doing. It's being done ad hoc by Mayor Cuomo, or Governor Cuomo, of New York State. But your point is, your suggestion, your thought is a good one, Jeff. Trump is doing his dog and pony show every day, and there needs to be a show that contrasts with his.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And frankly, in my opinion, there needs to be a show that calls him out. Seconds. And welcome back. Charles in Lake Elsinore, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? I was calling just to, talk about Trump and his political genius. We kind of discredit him for being an idiot, but I don't think that that's the case at all. I think that he's just mastered the art of misdirection and sleight of hand. If you look at all the things that he said he wanted to do, as far as deregulation and stuff like that, we argue about race, climate change, and all these things that he keeps us divided on. But he's, in the meantime, in the background, he's, deregulated the emissions for the auto industry. He's deregulated a lot of the environmental protections that we've had. And now I think with this COVID-19 thing, I don't think that it's an idiot or it was a mistake that he disbanded the group at the CDC that took care of Ebola so well in 2014. If you look at the swine flu, we had 300-some thousand deaths from that in 2009. They put together this task force and this group in the CDC, and we only have 15 cases in the United States of Ebola because we went out there and we aggressively attacked the problem, testing everything. With this COVID,
yeah, I don't think we had 300,000 deaths around the flu, but yeah, I get your point.
Okay, yeah. So with this COVID thing, now any logical human being wouldn't deny testing or think that, hey, we need to get aggressively find out who has it, especially how contagious it is. But if you look at it from the standpoint of someone, is in on it as far as he wants this stuff to happen, so we can just kind of allow the deregulation of the medical industry. And now, with the testing for the vaccines and stuff like that, and them kind of pushing it through to where, okay, you know what, we don't have to do these mandatory tests. It takes all this time. We're going to try all these drugs that have been sitting on the counters to where these pharmaceutical companies are going to make a killing. And, he's doing exactly what he says. Like I said, deregulating all these things. I don't think he's an idiot. I don't think that this is something that just happened by chance. You know, a lot of people, if this pandemic had happened with Ebola, you know, a lot of these companies like Merck and whoever makes these vaccines and these tests, they make a lot of money. You know. But I feel that that department and the CDC cost them a lot, and you know Trump's in on it somehow. And he, you know, like my point is just he's not as stupid as we make him out to be. He just knows how to manipulate us and keep us divided.
I think you're right, Charles. I would put a finer point on it, though. I would say that he's sly, not that he's smart. Because I don't think he's smart. I think you know, his intellect is below average, but I think he's very sly. He's got that grifter skill set that he has fine-tuned throughout his life, and I think he had to fine-tune it as a child because his mother didn't accept him and his father ridiculed him and trashed him regularly. His older brother committed suicide, basically, drank himself to death in his 40s. And I think that this was his survival skill when he was a kid. He had to BS his way through everything, and he got really good at it. And you know, the book report that I was reading before was about how, you know, he sold $700 million worth of bonds for the Trump Taj Mahal Hotel, and probably put most of that money in his bank, in his pocket, in his bank account, and then he defaulted on those bonds. He walked away from them, and the investors got burned, not him. I mean, this guy's a grifter, a world-class grifter, and he's grifting us. Charles, thank you for the call. And he's a very good grifter. He's a very competent grifter. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. So back in 2016, the election year, Donald Trump was not yet president. He was just running a scam university, Trump University. That year, and Barack Obama was president, that year, Corinthian Colleges and ITT Technical Institute, two scam for-profit colleges, went out of business and ended up leaving thousands, maybe tens of thousands of students just basically screwed. No degree, no job, and massive amounts of student debt. So President Obama and the Secretary of Education put together this plan. It's called the Borrower Defense Rule that said that if somebody got ripped off by one of these for-profit colleges, they didn't have to pay back the debt. If it was student debt that was issued by the federal government, we would just eat it as a country. They were the victims of fraud. Well, it turns out Betsy DeVos had other ideas. She came into office, of course, just months afterwards, as Donald Trump was sworn into office, and she's been fighting it all the way. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com and our new video for supporters of our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here, Beverly in Wellborn, Florida. Hey, Beverly, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling because I found out today that not only did our governor allow another cruise ship in with 23 people with the virus get off, but a cruise ship from Argentina that no other country would allow to dock, they let in to dock in Miami.
When?
I guess yesterday or very recent. I just found this out about 2 hours ago. So.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that story. That's amazing. I mean, yeah, you've got a governor who's just a classic Republican. He's totally irresponsible and he's just a hustler. I mean, it's so sad. Beverly, thank you for the call. Tom in Miami, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey,
Speaking of Florida.
I'm actually not in. Yeah, can you hear me okay? Hello?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm actually up in the Panhandle, northwest part of Florida.
Okay.
I actually got kicked out of, I don't know if I should say the name of the company, Wally World, for what I was wearing. Because I actually called 10 different Wally Worlds across the northwest part of Florida, and none of them had masks or gloves, so just out of craziness.
Is there such a thing as Wally World? I mean, you're talking about one of those movies, aren't you? One of the
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm being spoofed. I figured. Michael in Brookline, Massachusetts. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
The comparative mortality figures between Germany and Italy. Italy, according to their reported cases versus deaths, is about 11%. Germany is 0.6%, and Germany has a substantial number of cases. So the thing is that there are drugs on the market that had small trials, 300. That basically cut the virus times in your body very quickly, but likely.
Yeah. Michael, we're not going to be talking on the air about magic cures or anything like that. But yes, you're absolutely right that the German death rate is below the Italian death rate. There's probably several reasons for this. The main reason is probably that Germany is just now starting the curve. You've got 2 weeks from the time somebody's infected until they show symptoms. Then you've got 2 weeks from the time they show symptoms until they end up in the ICU. And then you got 2 weeks from the time they end up in the ICU until they're dead for that 1 or 2 or 3% who die. So Germany is not yet into that curve. They haven't yet hit the dead part yet. Italy has been in the dead part for a while. It's number one. Number two, Germany is doing aggressive testing and quarantining of people. So several friends of mine are Germans in Germany, and we've been corresponding in email, and they're in total lockdown. Italy didn't do that early on, before the crisis hit. Germany's doing that before the crisis hits. So therefore, their hospitals are not overwhelmed. In Italy, there are people showing up at the hospitals who might be saved if there was an available ventilator, but there's no available ventilator. For more than a week now, they have been prioritizing ventilators for people under 60, and people who don't have comorbid conditions. So a lot of the deaths that are happening in Italy right now are because Italy is making the exact same stupid mistake that America is making, or at least the red states are making, of saying, "Oh yeah, no problem. We'll worry about it when it becomes a crisis." Germany is saying, "No, not going to do that." And so their hospital system in Germany has not yet been overwhelmed. So they're able to care for people. And then number three, one of the reasons why Germany has a lower death rate than Italy is probably that they have a larger pool of people who've been tested, because they're aggressively testing people all around the state. So Dave in Hoffman States, Illinois. Dave, we have less than a minute. Got a quick one?
Okay, yeah. When Trump kept saying that the disease would probably go away when the warm weather hits, well, how does he talk about with Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Houston, Texas, Mississippi? Right now, I believe the temperatures are up in the upper 80s and stuff there. How hot does it need to get?
Yeah, and for that matter, southern Italy, which is starting, it's starting to roar into southern Italy now. It came into northern Italy, on the back of a tourist, basically, or a person who'd been traveling, and he came back and then, went to some big social event, and boom, it just got spread. This is what's going to happen with the churches in the South here in the United States. Now that the governor of Mississippi has said, go back to church, it's all good, and Donald Trump is talking, we'll go back to church by Easter. And so people are not taking it as seriously as they otherwise would. And this is a real flaming disaster. So anyhow, thanks for being with us this week. It's been a rough week. I don't think it's going to get any better. But if we hold together and if we hold each other in light and love and care and are considerate to the people around us and use our phones and our electronic media to reach out to neighbors and cut people a little slack, I think we'll make it through, at least most of us. And those who don't, well, you can lay their blood on Donald Trump's hands. We'll see you tomorrow, or we'll see you Monday, excuse me. And in the meantime, have a great and careful weekend. And get out there, get active, tag your
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.